Chapter 9. Letter Mina Harker to Lucy Westenra. Budapest, 24th August. My dearest Lucy, I know that you will be anxious to hear all that has happened since we parted at the railway station at Whitby. Well, my dear, I got to Hull all right, and caught the boat to Hamburg, and then to the train here. I feel I can hardly recall anything of the journey, except that I knew that I was coming to Jonathan, and that as I should do some nursing, I had better get all the sleep I could. I finally found my dear one, oh so thin and pale and weak-looking. All the resolution had gone from his dear eyes, and that quiet dignity from which I told you was in his face had all but vanished. He was only a wreck of himself, and he does not remember anything that has happened to him for a long time past. At least, he wants me to believe so, and I shall never ask. He has had some terrible shock, and I fear it may tax his poor brain if he were to try to recall it. Sister Agatha, who is a good creature and a born nurse, tells me that he raved of dreadful things whilst he was off in his head. I wanted to hear to her tell me what they were, but she would only cross herself and say that she would never tell, that the ravings of the sick were the secrets of God, and that if a nurse through her vocation should hear them, she should respect her trust. She is a sweet and good soul, and the next day, when she saw I was troubled, she opened up the subject again, and after saying that she could never mention what my poor dear raved about, added, "I can only tell you this much, my dear, that it was not about anything which he has done wrong himself, and you, as his young wife, have no cause to be concerned. He has not forgotten you, or what he owes to you. I fear his fear of great and terrible things, of which no mortal can treat of. I do believe the dear soul thought I might be jealous lest my poor dear should have fallen in love with any other girl. The idea of my being jealous of Jonathan! And yet, my dear, let me whisper, I felt a thrill of joy run through me when I knew that no other woman was cause for trouble. I am now sitting by his bedside, where I can see his face, and when he sleeps, oh, he is waking. When he woke, he asked for his coat, as he wanted to get things from his pocket. I asked Sister Agatha, and she brought all his things with me. I saw amongst them was his notebook, and was going to ask him to let me look at it, for I knew that I might find some clue to his trouble, but I suppose he must have seen the wish in my eyes, for he sent me over to the window, saying he wanted to be quite alone for a moment. Then he called me back, and when I came, he had his hand over his notebook, and he said to me very solemnly, "Wilhelmina." I knew then and there that he was in deadly earnest, for he never called me by that name since he has asked me to marry him. You know, my dear, my ideas of the trust between a husband and wife, that there should be no secrets or concealment. I have had a great shock, and when I think of what it is, I feel my head spin round, and I do not know if it were real or the dreaming of a madman. You know I've had brain fever, and that this must be mad. The secret in here, and I do not want to know it. I want to take up my life here, with our marriage. For my dear, we decided to be married as soon as the formalities are complete. Are you willing, Wilhelmina, to share my ignorance? Here is the book. Take it and keep it. Read it if you will, but never let me know, unless indeed some solemn duty should come upon me to go back to the bitter hours, awake or asleep, sane or mad, record it here. He fell back exhausted, and I put the book under his pillow and kissed him. I have asked Sister Agatha to beg the Superior to let our wedding be this afternoon, and am waiting for a reply. She has come to tell me that the chaplain of the English mission of the church has been sent for. We are to be married in an hour, or as soon as Jonathan awakes. Lucy, the time has come and gone. I feel very solemn, but very, very happy. Jonathan awoke a little after the hour, and was ready, and he sat up in his bed, propped up by pillows. He answered his "I will" firmly and strongly. I could hardly speak, my heart was so full of those words seemed to choke me. My dear sisters were so kind. Please, God, I shall never, ever forget them, nor the grave and sweet responsibilities I have taken upon me. I must tell you of my wedding present. When the chaplain and the sisters had left me alone with my husband, oh, Lucy, it is the first time I have written the words, my husband. Left me alone with my husband. I took the book from under his pillow and wrapped it in white paper and tied it with a little bit of pale blue ribbon which was around my neck and sealed it with a knot with a wax seal. And for my seal I used my wedding ring, and then I kissed it and showed it to my husband and told him that I would keep it so, and then would be an outward and visible sign for all of our lives we trusted each other, that I would never open it unless it was for his own dear sake or for the sake of some stern duty. Then he took my hand in his, and, oh, Lucy, it was the first time he took his wife's hand, and said it was the dearest thing in all the world, and that he would go through it all the past again to win it, if need be. The poor dear meant to have said a part of past, but he cannot think of that time yet, and I shall not wonder if at first he mixes up on only in his mouth but the year. Well, dear, what could I say? I could only tell him that I was the happiest woman in all the wide world, and that I had nothing to give him except myself, my life, and my trust, that with these went my love and duty for all the days of my life. And my dear, when he kissed me and drew me to him with his poor weak hands, it was like a very solemn pledge between us. Lucy, dear, do you know why I tell you this? It is not only because it is all so sweet to me, but because you have been and always are very dear to me. It was my privilege to be your friend and guide when you came from that schoolroom to prepare for the world of life. I want to see you now, and see the happy eyes of a very happy wife, whither duty had left me, so that in your own married life you too may be happy in all the things that I am. My dear, please, Almighty God, your life may be all that may your life be all that it promises, a long day of sunshine, with no harsh winds, no forgetting duty, no distrust. I must not wish you no pain, for that can never be. But I do hope you will always be as happy as I am now. Goodbye, my dear. I shall post this once again, and perhaps write to you very soon. I must stop, for Jonathan is waking. I must attend to my husband. Your ever-loving Mina Harker. Letter, Lucy Westenra to Mina Harker, Whitby, 30 August. My dearest Mina, oceans of love and millions of kisses, and may you be in your own home with your husband. I wish you could be coming home soon enough to stay here with us. The strong air would soon restore Jonathan. It has quite restored me. I have had appetite like a conformant, am full of life and sleep well. You will be glad to know that I have quite given up walking in my sleep. I think I have not stirred out of my bed for a good week. That was when I once got into the night. Arthur tells me I am getting fat. By the way, I forgot to tell you that Arthur is here. We have such long and lovely walks and drives and rides and rows and tennis and fishing together, and I love him now more than ever. He tells me he loves me more, but I doubt that, for at first he told me he could not love me more than he already did then. But this is nonsense. There he is, calling to me. So no more just at present for your loving Lucy. P.S. Mother sends her love. She seems better, poor dear. P.P.S. We are to be married on the 28th of September. Dr. Seward's Diary, 20th August. The case of Renfield grows more interesting. He is now so far quieted that there are spells of secession in his passion. For the first few weeks after his attack, he was perpetually violent. Then, one night, just as the moon rose, he grew quiet and kept murmuring to himself, "Now I can wait. Now I can wait." The attendant came to me, so I ran down at once to look at him. He was still in the strait waistcoat and in the padded room, but the suffused look had gone from his face, and his eyes had something of their old pleading. I might have almost say cringing softness. I was satisfied of his present condition, and directed him to be relieved. The attendant hesitated, but finally carried out my wishes without protest. It was a strange thing that the patient had humor enough to see their distrust, for, coming close to me, he said in a whisper, all the while looking furtively at them, "They think I could hurt you. Fancy me hurting you, the fools!" It was soothing, somewhat, for the feelings, to find myself disassociated even in the mind of this poor madman from others. But all the same, I do not follow his thought. Am I in to take it that I have anything in common with him, so that we are, as it were, to stand together? And has he to gain from me some good so stupendous that my well-being is needful to him? I must find out later on. Tonight he will not speak. Even the offer of a kitten or a full-grown cat will not tempt him. He would only say, "I do not take stock in cats. I have more to think of now, and I can wait. I can wait." After a while, I left him, and the attendant tells me that he was quiet till just before dawn, and then he began to get uneasy, and at length violent, until at last he fell into a paroxysm which exhausted him so that he swooned into a sort of coma. 3 nights has the same thing happened, violent all day and quiet from moonrise to sunrise. I wish I could get some clue as to the cause, but it would seem almost as if there was some influence which came and went. Happy thought. We shall tonight play sane wits amongst mad ones. He escaped before without our help. Tonight he shall escape with it. We shall give him a chance, and have men follow ready to follow in case they are required. 23rd August. The unexpected always happens. How well deserve a new life? Our bird from which he found the cage open will not fly, so all subtle arrangements were for naught. At any rate, we were proved one thing: the spells of quietness last a reasonable amount of time. We shall in the future be able to ease his bonds for a few hours each day. I have given orders to the night attendant merely to shut him in the padded room, where, when once he is quiet, until an hour before sunrise. The poor soul's body will enjoy the relief, even if his mind cannot appreciate it. Hark! The unexpected again. I am called. The patient has once more escaped. Later. Another night adventure. Renfield artfully waited until the attendant was entering the room to inspect. Then he dashed out past him and flew down the passage. I sent word for the attendant to follow. Again he went into the grounds of the deserted house, and we found him in the same place, pressed against the old chapel door. When he saw me, he became furious, and had not the attendant seized him in time, he would have surely tried to kill me. As we were holding him, a strange thing happened. He seemed redoubled in his efforts, and then as suddenly grew calm. I looked round instinctively, but could see nothing. Then I caught the patient's eye and followed it, but could trace nothing as it looked into the moonlight sky except for a big bat which flapped its wings silently and ghostly way to the west. Bats usually wheel and flit about, but this one seemed to go straight on, as if it knew where it was bound for and had some intention of its own. The patient grew calmer in an instant and presently said, "You needn't tie me. I shall go quietly." Without trouble, he came back to the house. I fear there is something ominous in his calm, and I shall not be forgetted tonight. Lucy Westenra's diary. Hillingham, 24th August. I must imitate Mina and keep writing things down. Then we can have long talks when we do meet. I wonder when it will be. I wish you were with me again, for I feel so unhappy. Last night I seemed to be dreaming again, just as I was at Whitby. Perhaps it's the change of air or getting home again? It is all so dark and horrid to me, for I cannot remember nothing, and I am full of a vague fear, and I feel so weak and worn out. When Arthur came to lunch, he looked quite grieved when he saw me, and I hadn't the spirit to try to be cheerful. I wonder if I could sleep in his mother's room tonight. I shall make an excuse and try. 25th August. Another bad night. Mother didn't seem to take to my proposal. She seems not too well herself, and doubtlessly she fears to worry me. I tried to keep awake, and succeeded for a while, but when the clock struck 12, it waked me from a doze, and I must have been falling asleep. There was a sort of scratching and flapping at the window, but I did not mind it. And as I remember no more, I suppose I must have then fallen asleep. More bad dreams. I wish I could remember them. This morning I am horribly weak. My face is ghostly pale, and my throat pains me. It must be something wrong with my lungs, for I don't seem to ever get enough air. I shall try to cheer up when Arthur comes, or else I know he will be miserable to see me so.
Letter. Arthur Holmwood to Dr. Seward. Almirel Hotel, 31 August. My dear Jack, I want you to do me a favor. Lucy is ill. That is, she has no special disease, but she looks awful, and is getting worse every day. I have asked her if there is any cause. I do not dare ask her from her mother, for to disturb the poor lady's mind about her daughter in her present state of health would be fatal. Mrs. Westenra has confided in me that her doom is spoken, disease of the heart, though poor Lucy does not know it yet. I am sure there is something preying on my dear girl's mind. I am almost distracted when I think of her. To look at her gives me such a pang. I told her I should ask you to see her, and though she demurs it at first, I know why, old fellow, she finally consented. It was such a painful I know it will be a painful task for you, I know, old friend, but it is for her sake. I must not hesitate to ask, or you to act. You are to come at lunch at Hillingham tomorrow, 2 o'clock, so as not to arouse any suspicion in Miss Westenra's. And after lunch, Lucy will take the opportunity to be alone and with you. I shall come in for tea, and we shall all go away together. I am filled with anxiety, and want to consult with you alone, as soon as I can after you see her for yourself. Do not fail. Arthur. Telegram. Arthur Holmwood to Seward. As am summoned to my father, who is worse, am writing. Will write me full by tonight's post to ring. Wire me if necessary. Letter from Dr. Seward to Arthur Holmwood, 2nd September. My dear old fellow, with regard to Miss Westenra's health, I hasten to let you know at once that in my opinion there is not any functional disturbance or malady that I know of. At the same time, I am not by any means satisfied by her appearance. She is woefully different from when I last saw her. Of course, you must bear in mind that I did not have a full opportunity of examination, such as I should wish. Our very friendship makes it a little difficult, which not even medical science or custom can bridge over. I'd better tell you exactly what happened, leaving you to draw and measure your own conclusions. I shall then say what I have done and proposed of doing. I found Miss Westenra in seemingly gay spirits. Her mother was present, and in a few seconds I made up my mind that she was trying all that she knew to mislead her mother and prevent her from being anxious. I have no doubt she guesses. If she does not know, what need of caution is there? We lunched alone, and as we exerted ourselves to be cheerful, we got, as some kind of reward for our labors, some real cheerfulness amongst us. Then Miss Westenra went to lie down, and Lucy was left with me. We went into her boudoir, and till we got there, her gaiety remained, for the servants were coming and going. As soon as the door closed, however, the mask fell from her face, and she sank into a chair with a great sigh, and hid her eyes with her hand. When I saw that her high spirits had failed, I at once took advantage of her reaction to make a diagnosis. She said very sweetly to me, "I cannot tell you how I loathed talking about myself." I reminded her that as a doctor's confidence was sacred, but that you were grievously anxious about her. She caught on to my meaning at once, and settled into that matter in a word. "Tell Arthur everything you choose. I do not care for myself, but all for him, so I am quite free." I could easily see that she was somewhat bloodless, but I could not see the usual anemic signs, and by chance I was able to test the quality of her blood, for in the opening of a window which was stifled a cord gave way, and she cut her hand slightly in the broken glass. It was a slight matter in and of itself, but it gave me the evident chance, and I secured a few drops of blood and analyzed them. The qualitative analysis gives a quite normal condition and shows, I should infer, in itself a vigorous state of health. In other physical matters, I was quite satisfied that there was no need for anxiety. But as there must be some cause somewhere, I have come to the conclusion that it must be something mental. She complains of difficulty breathing satisfactorily at times, and of heavy lethargic sleep with dreams that frighten her, but regarding which she can remember nothing. She says as a child she used to walk in her sleep, and that when in Whitby the habit came back, and once she walked out in the night and went to the East Cliff, where Miss Murray found her. But she assures me that of late the habit has not returned. I am in doubt, so I have done the best that I know of. I have written to my old friend and master, Professor Van Helsing, in Amsterdam, who knows more about obscure diseases than anyone in the world. I have asked him to come over, and yet, as you've told me that all things to be at your charge, I have mentioned to him who you are and your relations to Miss Westenra. This, my dear fellow, is in obedience to your wishes, for I am only too proud and happy to do anything I can for her. Van Helsing would, I know, do anything for me for a personal reason, so no matter on what grounds that he comes, he must accept his wishes. We must accept his wishes. He seems seemingly arbitrarily an arbitrarily man, but this he knows what will come is talking about better than anyone else. He is a philosopher and a metaphysician, and is one of the most advanced scientists of his day, and he has, I believe, an absolutely open mind. This, with an iron nerve, a temper of the ice brook, an indomitable resolution, self-command and toleration exalted for the virtues of two blessings, and the kindest and truest heart that beats. These form his equipment of the noble work which he is doing for mankind, work both in theory and in practice, for his views are as wide as his all-embracing sympathy. I tell you these facts that you may know why I have such confidence in him. I have asked him to come at once. I shall see Miss Westenra tomorrow. She is to meet me at the stores, so that I may not alarm her mother by all too early a repetition of my call. Yours always, John Seward. Letter. Abraham Van Helsing, M.D., D, Ph.D., Lit., etc., etc., to Dr. Seward, 2nd September. My good friend John, when I received your letter, I am already coming to you. By good fortune, I can leave just as once tomorrow, without wrong to having anything that would have trusted you with those who have trusted me. Were fortune other, then it would be bad for those who have trust. For I have come to my friend when he has called me to aid those who he holds dear. Tell your friend that when the time comes you suck from my wound so swiftly the poison of gangrene from that knife that our other friend, too nervous, let slip, you did more for him than when he wants my aid, and you will call for him than all of his great fortunes can do so. But it is my pleasure to aid him and to do it. Your friend. It is to you that I come. Have then rooms for me at Great Eastern Hotel, so that I may be near to hand, and please it so arrange so that we may see the young lady, or not too late on tomorrow, for it is likely that I may have to return that night. But if need be, I shall come again tomorrow on 3 days, and stay longer if I must. So then, goodbye, my friend John. Helsing. Letter. Dr. Seward to Honorable Arthur Holmwood, 3rd September. My dear Art, Van Helsing has come and gone. He came with me to Hillingham, and found that by Lucy's discretion her mother was lurching out, so that we were alone with her. Van Helsing made a careful examination of the patient. He is to report to me, and I shall advise to you, of course, for I was not present all of the time. He is, I fear, much concerned, but says he must think. When I told him of our friendship and how you trust me in the matters, he said, "You must tell him all that you think. Tell him what I think, if you can guess it, if you will. Nay, I am not jesting. This is no jest, but life and death. Perhaps more." I asked what he meant by that, for he was very serious. This was when he came back to town and was having a cup of tea before starting out on his return to Amsterdam. He would not give me any further clue. You must not be angry with me, Art, because of his very reluctance means that all of his brains are working for her own good. He speaks very plainly enough that the time comes, be sure. So, I told him that I would simply write an account of our visit, just as if I were doing a descriptive special article for the Daily Telegraph. He seems not to notice, but remarks that the smuts in London are not quite so bad as they would be used whether he was a student here. I am to get his report tomorrow, if he can possibly make it. In any case, I am to have a letter. Well, as to the visit of Lucy, she was very much more cheerful than on the day when I first saw her, and certainly looked a lot better. She has lost some of the ghastly look that so upset you, and her breathing is so normal. She was very sweet to the professor, as she always is, and tried to make him feel at ease, though I could see that the poor girl was making a hard struggle of it. I believe Van Helsing saw it too, for I saw a quick look under his bushy brows that I knew of old. Then he began to chat of all things except ourselves and disease, and with such an infinite gaiety that I could see poor Lucy's pretense of animation merged into reality. And then, without a seeming change, he brought the conversation gently around to his visit, and suavely said, "My dear young miss, I have the so great pleasure because you are so much beloved. That is, my dear, ever were you there to be which I do not see. They told me that you were down in the spirit, and that you were of a ghastly pale. To them I say, poof!" And he snapped his fingers at me and went, "But you and I shall show how wrong they are. How can he pointed at me with the same look and gesture that which when he once pointed at me in his class on, or rather after a particular occasion when he never fails to remind me, "Know anything of young ladies? He has had his madams to play with and to bring them back to happiness, and those that love him. It is much to do, and but there are rewards in that we can bestow such happiness. But the young ladies, he has no wife, no daughter, and the young do not tell themselves to the young, but to the old, like me, who should have known so many sorrows and causes of them. So, my dear, we will send him away to smoke the cigarette in the garden, whilst you and I have a little talk all to ourselves." I took the hint and strolled about, and presently the professor came to the window and called me in. He looked grave, but said, I have made careful examinations, but there is no functional cause. With you I agree that there is much blood loss. It has been, but is not. But the conditions of her are in no way anemic. I have asked her to send me her maid, so that I may just ask one or two questions, but so that I may not chance to miss nothing. I know well what she will say, but yet there is cause. There is always cause for everything. I must go back home and think. You must send to me the telegram every day, and if there be cause, I shall come again. The disease, for not to be all too well as a disease, interests me. And the young, sweet dear, she interests me too. She charmed me. And for her, if not for you or disease, I come. As I tell you, he said not one word more, even when we were alone. So now, Art, you know as all I know. I shall keep stern watch. I trust your poor father is rallying. It must be a terrible thing to you, my dear old fellow, to be in place of such a position between two people who are so dear to you. I know your idea of duty to your father, and you are right to stick to it. But if need be, I shall send word to come at once to Lucy. So do not be over anxious unless you hear from me. Dr. Seward's Diary. 4th September. Zoophalagis' patient still keeps our interest in him. He has only had one outburst, and that was yesterday at an unusual time. Just before the stroke of noon, he began to grow restless. The attendant knew the symptoms, and at once summoned aid. Fortunately, the men came at a run, and were just in time, for at the stroke of noon he became so violent that it took all of their strength just to hold him. In about 5 minutes, however, he began to get more and more quiet, and finally sunk into a sort of melancholy, in which state he had remained up until now. The attendants tell me that his screams, while in the pragmosiasm, were really quite appalling. I found my hands full when I got in, attending to some of the other patients who were frightened by him. Indeed, I can quite understand the effect, for the sounds disturbed even me, though I was some distance away. It is now after dinner hour at the asylum, and yet my patient sits in a corner brooding, with a dull, sullen, woeful, begone look in his eyes, which seems to rather indicate than to show something directly. I cannot quite understand it. Later, another change in my patient. At 5 o'clock, I looked in on him and found him seemingly as happy and as contented as he used to be. He was catching flies and eating them, and was keeping notes of his capture by making nail marks in the edge of the door between the ridges of padding. When he saw me, he came over and apologized for his bad conduct, and asked me in a very humbling, cringing way to be led back to his own room and to have his notebook again. I thought it well to humor him. So he is back in his room with the window open. He's had the sugar of his tea spread on the windowsill, and reaping quite the harvest of flies. He is not now eating them, but putting them in a box, as of old, and is already examining the corners of his room to find a spider. I tried to get him to talk about the past few days, for any clue to his thoughts about that would be immense help to me, but he would not rise. For a moment or two he looked very sad, and said in a sort of far-away voice, as though saying it rather to himself than to me, "All over. All over. He has deserted me. No hope for now unless I do it for myself." Then suddenly turning to me in a resolute way, he said, "Doctor, won't you be very good to me and let me have a little more sugar? I think it would be very good for me." "And the flies?" I said. "Yes, the flies like it too, and I like the flies, therefore I like it. And there are people who know so little as to think that madmen do not argue." I procured him a double supply, and left him as happy as a man can be, I suppose, in any of the worlds I see. I wish only that I could fathom his mind. Midnight. Another change in him. I had been to see Miss Westenra, who I found much better, and had just returned, and was standing at our own gate looking at the sunset, when once more I heard him yelling. As his room is on this side of the house, I could hear it better than in the morning. It was a shock to me to turn from the wonderful smoky beauty of the sunset over London, with its lurid lights and inky shadows, and all the marvelous tints that come on foul clouds, even on foul water, and to realize all the grim sternness of my own stone-cold building, with its wealth of breathing misery, and my own desolate heart to endure it all. I reached him just as the sun was going down, and from his window I saw the red disk sink. As it sank, he became less and less frenzied, and just as it dipped, he slid from his hands that held him, an inert mass on the floor. It was wonderful, however, what intellectual recuperative powers lunatics have, for within a few minutes he stood up quite calmly and looked around him. I signaled to the attendants not to hold him, for I was anxious to see what he would do. He went straight over to the window and brushed away all the crumbs of sugar, and then he took his fly box and emptied it outside and threw the box away. Then he shut the window, and crossing himself, sat down on his bed. All this surprised me, so I asked him, "Are you not going to keep flies any more?" "No," said he. "I am sick of all that rubbish." He certainly is a wonderfully interesting study. I wish I could get some glimpse into his mind, or the cause of his sudden passion. Stop. There may be a clue after all. If we could only find why today his paroxysms came at high noon and at sunset. Can it be that there is a malign influence of the sun of periods which affect certain natures, as at times the moon does to others? We shall see. Telegram, Seward, London, to Van Helsing, Amsterdam. 4th September. Patient still better today. Telegram, Seward, London, to Van Helsing, Amsterdam. 5th September. Patient greatly improved. Good appetite, sleeps naturally. Good spirits, color coming back. Telegram, Seward, London, to Van Helsing, Amsterdam. 6th September. Terrible change for the worse. Come at once. Do not lose an hour. I hold over telegram to Homewood till I have seen you.